The tension in the studio was palpable as the cameras zoomed in on the stage. It was supposed to be just another routine talk show, another chance for Taylor Swift to promote her latest album, another hour of her carefully curated public persona. But no one could have anticipated the moment that would unfold. As the lights dimmed, the familiar music intro played, and the audience settled into their seats. Everyone knew tonight's show was going to be something different. The host, Karoline Leavitt, stood at the podium ready to introduce her guest, the pop icon Taylor Swift. But Karoline wasn't interested in playing the role of the starstruck fan. She wasn't about to fall into the trap of polite small talk and superficial praise. Karoline had built her career on one thing: honesty. And tonight, her audience would witness the kind of interview that would shatter the glittering facade surrounding Taylor Swift. As Taylor entered the stage, flashing her trademark smile, the crowd erupted in applause. But Karoline's eyes weren't filled with admiration. They were sharp, calculating, almost as if she were studying her opponent. Taylor, ever the professional, waved to the crowd and took her seat on the couch, radiating warmth and charm. "So, Taylor," Karoline began, her tone casual but with an edge that only the most perceptive could catch. "We've heard a lot about your music, your tours, your love life. People can't seem to get enough of it. But how much of it is really you?" A hush fell over the audience. The question wasn't an ordinary one. Taylor's smile faltered for just a second, but she quickly recovered. "Well, I think my music is an extension of me, Karoline," she replied smoothly. "It's always been about sharing my experiences, my emotions. It's all very personal." Karoline leaned in, her gaze intense. "Personal? Or is it just another brand, carefully packaged for the public? You've built an empire on the back of your so-called personal stories, but how much of it is actually real, and how much of it is just a well-timed PR move?" The words hit like a punch. Taylor's eyes flickered for a split second, but she quickly regained her composure. "I write from the heart, Karoline. Anyone who knows me knows that." But Karoline wasn't backing down. "And that's the thing, isn't it? You've become this untouchable figure, constantly marketed as the girl next door, the voice of a generation. But don't you ever wonder if the image you've carefully crafted is just a little too perfect? Too rehearsed?" The audience shifted uncomfortably. Was this a setup for some harmless banter, or was Karoline truly challenging Taylor in a way no one had before? And if so, why? Was this a personal attack, or was Karoline just trying to peel back the layers of the celebrity that so many people had come to revere? Taylor, now visibly on edge, paused. "I'm not sure where you're going with this, Karoline, but my fans know who I am. They understand my music. They've been with me through thick and thin." Karoline's eyes never left hers. "Do they, though? Or do they just see what you want them to see? The polished, flawless version of yourself that you've chosen to present to the world?" It was a question that hung in the air, thick with implication. The audience seemed to hold its breath, unsure of how Taylor would respond, unsure of where this was going. Could this be the start of a full-on confrontation? Was Karoline really willing to take down Taylor Swift's carefully constructed image on live television? Karoline wasn't finished. "Because, Taylor, if there's one thing I've learned in this industry, it's that the truth always comes out, no matter how hard you try to hide it. And tonight, we're going to see if the truth behind the Swift brand is as polished as it seems." There it was. The first shot fired. What would Taylor do next? Would she push back, or would she crumble under the weight of Karoline's relentless questioning? Was this going to be the interview that exposed the real Taylor Swift, or would it become just another skirmish in the war between image and reality? The audience waited, eyes wide, as the tension in the room thickened. Karoline had just laid down the gauntlet. Now it was Taylor's turn to respond. Taylor's initial silence was like the calm before a storm. The room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for her to react, to fire back with her usual grace, or to defend her brand as she'd done countless times before. But this time, something felt different. The sharpness in Karoline's voice was impossible to ignore, and the edge to her questions pierced deeper than any of Taylor's previous interviews. Taylor finally exhaled, a forced smile curling on her lips. "I think you're misunderstanding me, Karoline. My fans don't just see what I want them to see. They see the real me. I've spent my career being honest with them, and they've supported me because of it." Karoline's eyes narrowed, a flicker of doubt crossing her face. "Honest, you say? That's interesting. Because, with all due respect, Taylor, what's honest about your relationship with the media? You've built a career on making sure the world only sees what you want them to. You've mastered the art of controlling the narrative." The words stung more than Taylor had anticipated. The calm, collected persona she had spent years constructing was suddenly under siege. The perfect image she had so carefully curated, her pristine reputation as the sweet, relatable pop star, was being dissected in front of millions. "I've worked hard for my success," Taylor replied, her voice tight but controlled. "Every step of the way I've earned everything I have. No one can take that away from me." Karoline leaned forward, her voice soft but pointed. "Oh, I don't want to take anything away from you, Taylor. I'm just asking, how much of it was really earned? And how much of it was built on the backs of controversies, feuds, and well-placed media spins?" The room went quiet. Karoline's words hung in the air like a weight, forcing Taylor to confront something she'd spent years avoiding. Could it be that her rise to fame had been shaped by more than just talent and hard work? Were the rumors, the scandals, the highly publicized relationships all part of a grand strategy? For the first time that night, Taylor's eyes flickered with something more than irritation, something closer to uncertainty. She opened her mouth to speak but hesitated, as if searching for the right words. Karoline wasn't done yet, sensing that the cracks had begun to show. "Look, I'm not saying you don't have talent, Taylor. Clearly you do. But when you look back on your career, can you honestly say it's all been about the music? Or has it also been about controlling the narrative, managing your image, and shaping the public's perception of you at every turn?" Taylor shifted in her seat, the smile faltering, her usual poise slipping just slightly. "I've always believed that music is my truest form of expression," she said, her voice growing more defensive. "People who appreciate my work know that, and they know me, not just the stories the media tries to sell." Karoline nodded slowly, her voice turning calm, almost sympathetic. "But is that really the case? Or have you created a world where the real Taylor Swift, the one beneath all the layers, remains a mystery? The world gets the version of you that you want them to see, and you've made sure of that. But at what cost, Taylor? At what point do you stop being the version of yourself you've been told to be and start being you?" The question hit harder than any of Karoline's previous jabs. The word "you," simple, yet powerful, echoed through the studio. The audience was stunned into silence. The tension was almost unbearable. What was Taylor Swift hiding? What did she fear revealing? Taylor looked down at her hands, momentarily lost in thought. The pressure was mounting, and Karoline's words were now a voice in her head she couldn't shake. Her image, her brand, had it all been carefully constructed? Was she just a puppet in the hands of her management, of the media? Or was there something real beneath the surface? For a moment it seemed as though Taylor might let the mask slip entirely. But just as quickly, she raised her head, her face regaining that familiar composure. She wasn't going to give in, not without a fight. "Maybe you're right, Karoline," Taylor said, the words almost measured. "Maybe I've been careful with how much I reveal. But that's my choice. I don't owe anyone an explanation. For my personal life," Karoline's gaze hardened. "But the public doesn't just buy your music, Taylor. They buy into your image, your story. And when that story is carefully crafted, carefully manipulated, what happens when it starts to unravel? What happens when the truth can't be hidden anymore?" The challenge was now laid bare, and the stakes had never been higher. Taylor could continue to hold her ground, to protect the persona she had built. Or she could allow the truth to slip through the cracks, exposing herself in ways she never had before. The audience was on the edge of their seats, waiting for Taylor's response. The tension in the room was thick, and it was clear that Karoline had won the first round. But would Taylor fight back? Or would she give in to the pressure? The silence stretched out, and every eye in the room was fixed on Taylor Swift. Taylor's hand gripped the edge of her seat as if trying to anchor herself to something solid. The silence in the studio stretched, oppressive and heavy. The audience was waiting, collectively holding its breath, and Taylor knew the weight of the moment. Karoline's questions weren't just about music. They were about everything Taylor had built. Her brand, her image, her empire. The floor beneath her felt fragile, like it might collapse at any moment. For a fleeting second, Taylor considered retreating into her familiar narrative, to respond with a practiced smile and deflect the questions, to recite the lines that had worked for years. But Karoline's relentless probing had shattered that option. This wasn't just another promotional interview. This was a battle, one that Taylor had not expected to fight tonight. But now she had no choice but to engage. The air in the room felt thick with anticipation. Karoline's eyes, intense and unyielding, didn't waver as she waited for an answer. Taylor's jaw tightened. She had built her career by controlling the narrative, by carefully curating her image. But now, for the first time in a long time, the narrative was slipping out of her grasp. Karoline wasn't just asking questions. She was exposing vulnerabilities Taylor hadn't even realized she had. "I'm not just a brand," Taylor finally spoke, her voice low but unwavering. "I'm a person. And the people who love my music, they love me, not just the version of me that's portrayed in the media. You might think it's all calculated, Karoline, but my fans know better." Karoline tilted her head, a slight smirk playing on her lips. "Is that what you tell yourself, Taylor? That it's all real? That every carefully constructed album, every social media post, every relationship you've ever been in wasn't part of the package deal? Let me ask you this. What happens when the story you've told everyone crumbles? What happens when the real Taylor Swift is forced to stand on her own, without the protection of the brand?" The question cut through the air like a knife. There it was again. The truth that Taylor had spent years running from. Karoline was pushing her, pulling her out of her comfort zone, and for the first time, Taylor didn't have a well-rehearsed answer. She was raw, vulnerable, caught in the glare of the spotlight like never before. "People want the truth, Karoline," Taylor said, her voice firmer now. "They want to believe in something. They want to look up to me because I've shown them a side of me that's real. Not everything is a calculated move. Some things are just life. We all have our flaws." Karoline's response was almost a whisper, but it cut through the room with surgical precision. "Flaws? So what you're saying is, this isn't all just a facade. You've never once manipulated a narrative, used a scandal to your advantage, or allowed the media to fuel a story that wasn't entirely your own doing." There was a moment of silence. It wasn't just uncomfortable, it was profound. The question wasn't just about Taylor's career, it was about her integrity, her authenticity. Karoline was daring to suggest that the very thing Taylor had built, her career on, the idea that she was different, that she was real, might have been a lie. Taylor felt something stir inside her, an anger she hadn't known she had. She'd spent years cultivating the image of the girl who had come from nothing, who had fought through adversity to achieve her dreams. Now Karoline was suggesting that all of it could be a lie, that the very foundation of her success had been built on manipulation. It was a thought she couldn't ignore. "Why does it have to be one or the other?" Taylor shot back, her voice rising slightly, no longer the calm and controlled figure the audience had come to expect. "I've worked hard for everything I have. Yes, I've faced challenges, and yes, I've made mistakes. But I've always been honest with my fans. I've never pretended to be someone I'm not." Caroline's lips curled into a small smile. "Honest, you say? Let's break this down. You've crafted the story of your life, Taylor. From your early days in Nashville, to the pop star transformation, to the public breakups and makeups. You've positioned yourself as the girl who's been misunderstood, the one who's always been true to herself. But what happens when the curtain falls and the real you is faced with questions you can't control? There was a shift in the room. Karoline wasn't just challenging Taylor's brand anymore. She was exposing the very core of it. The perfect, untouchable image that had taken years to build was suddenly unraveling, one thread at a time. The audience could feel it, the rising tension in the air, the uncomfortable realization that this wasn't just an interview. It was an unmasking. Taylor could feel the weight of the question bearing down on her. For so long, she had hidden behind the shield of her image. Now, Karoline was tearing it down piece by piece, revealing a vulnerability that no one had seen before. What did it mean to be real in a world that demanded perfection? Could Taylor ever truly be herself in the public eye? Or had the persona become the only version of her that mattered? For the first time that night, Taylor was no longer the one in control of the conversation. And that realization stung more than any of Karoline's questions ever could. The silence between them stretched, thick with unspoken tension. Would Taylor fight back, or would she finally acknowledge the truth Karoline had exposed? The studio felt like it was on the edge of collapse. Every word Karoline had spoken was like a match being struck against Taylor's carefully built world, and the flames were starting to spread. The crowd was on the edge of their seats, unsure of where this conversation was going, but certain that it was heading into uncharted territory. Taylor was no longer the image of the calm, untouchable superstar. She was vulnerable, unsure, perhaps for the first time in her career, uncertain of how to respond. Karoline had her foot on the gas now. She could sense that Taylor's defenses were slipping. It wasn't just the questions anymore. It was the way she was dissecting Taylor's carefully constructed persona, the way she was peeling back the layers of the image that had made Taylor Swift a household name. And Karoline was enjoying every moment of it. Not because she wanted to destroy Taylor, but because she wanted the truth to come out. The real, unfiltered version of the woman who had captivated the world for so long. "Let's get to the heart of it, Taylor," Karoline said, her voice calm yet charged with purpose. "We've talked about your image, your fans, your music. But we both know that success in this industry doesn't come without its sacrifices. You've made your peace with the fact that your personal life is fair game, haven't you?" Taylor's eyes narrowed, and she shifted in her seat. The question hit too close to home. Her relationships, her public feuds, even the endless rumors. Karoline was right. She had allowed her personal life to be exploited in the name of fame and fortune. It wasn't just a part of her story. It was the story. The drama, the breakups, the makeups. Every bit of it had been part of her carefully crafted image, and she had let the world consume it. "I don't control the media," Taylor said, her voice tight. "I've never controlled the stories they tell about me." Karoline tilted her head, an almost imperceptible smile playing on her lips. "Really? Because it seems to me that you've always been one step ahead. From your feuds with fellow celebrities to the way you've used your personal life to fuel your narrative, you've managed the stories. Haven't you? You've built a brand, Taylor, and it's one that thrives on drama. You've created a world where the line between truth and fiction is blurred, and now the truth is being exposed." Taylor's fingers gripped the armrest of the couch, her nails digging into the fabric. Karoline wasn't wrong. She had built her empire on both her talent and the public's insatiable appetite for the chaos that swirled around her. The breakups that had been turned into anthems, the very public disputes with ex-boyfriends and rivals. Hadn't they all contributed to her success? She had marketed herself as the wounded heart, the victim of bad love, the girl who was always misunderstood. And it had worked. But now, in this moment, Karoline was demanding that Taylor confront the consequences of that. The success had come at a cost Taylor was only now beginning to fully comprehend. "There's a difference between personal and public, Karoline," Taylor said, her voice shaking just slightly, her attempt to reclaim control evident. "I'm allowed to share parts of myself with my fans. That's what connects us." Karoline leaned in, her voice low, almost conversational. "Is that what connects you, though? Or is it the idea of you? The image you've created for them to consume? Because, let's face it, what happens when that image doesn't align with the truth anymore? When the real Taylor Swift isn't quite as perfect as the world thinks? What happens when you can't control the narrative anymore?" The question hung in the air, more charged than any of the others before it. The truth was being laid bare, piece by piece, and Taylor was struggling to keep up. She had lived her entire career as a master manipulator of her own story. But now, for the first time, she was being forced to confront the consequences of that manipulation. Taylor's face flushed, and she looked away for a brief moment, as though she could somehow retreat into the comfort of her manufactured world. But there was no going back. Karoline had exposed the very thing Taylor had feared for years. The possibility that the world might no longer see her as a real person, but as a creation. A perfect, polished facade that only existed because she allowed it to. The silence that followed was deafening. Karoline didn't speak, didn't push for a response. She simply sat there, watching as Taylor struggled to hold on to her composure, watching as the cracks in her polished image deepened with every passing second. "Look," Taylor finally said, her voice trembling but resolute. "I'm not perfect. No one is. But I've never done anything to hurt anyone intentionally. I've never lied about who I am." Karoline nodded, her eyes never leaving Taylor's. "But what about the lies you tell yourself, Taylor? What about the story you've told yourself? About who you are? Is that really the truth? Or just a version of yourself you've convinced yourself is the real one?" The question stung. Taylor could feel the weight of it pressing on her chest, suffocating her. She had spent so long running from the truth, hiding behind her carefully curated image, that she wasn't sure anymore what was real and what was just part of the show. The lines between them had blurred until they were impossible to distinguish. The studio felt colder now, the lights harsher. The tension was unbearable, and Taylor's face, once confident and poised, now showed a flicker of something raw, something human. Would she admit it? Would she finally say the words that Karoline was daring her to speak? Or would she retreat back into the safety of the persona she had so carefully constructed? The world waited for her response. The tension in the room reached a boiling point, the silence between Karoline and Taylor hanging in the air like a thick fog, waiting to be pierced by one of them. It was clear now that this wasn't just about an interview anymore. It was a reckoning. A reckoning that Taylor Swift, the pop icon, the superstar, the girl who had always been in control, was now being asked to face the parts of herself she'd kept hidden for years. Taylor felt the weight of the question pressing down on her. Was the real Taylor Swift the one that the world adored? Or was there something deeper beneath the surface, something more authentic, something less manufactured than the carefully curated image she had spent so many years building? She swallowed, the reality of it all crashing down on her. The audience was watching, waiting for her to make her move. They wanted the truth. Karoline wanted the truth. And for the first time in a long time, Taylor wasn't sure she could deliver it. But in that moment, something shifted inside her. The need to defend herself, to protect her carefully crafted image, to keep up the facade. All of it started to feel pointless. Was this who she really was? The polished, perfect pop star? The one who lived by the script the media had written for her? Or was she someone else entirely? Someone more human, more raw, someone who could finally face the world without the layers. Of protection she had built over the years? Taylor's gaze softened as she met Karoline's eyes. It was as if, for the first time in years, she allowed herself to see herself as the person she truly was, without the filters of fame, without the protection of her public persona. "I've spent so many years pretending," Taylor said quietly, her voice shaky but full of conviction. "Pretending that I'm something I'm not, that I'm perfect, that I'm invincible. But I'm not. I'm just like everyone else. I make mistakes. I have flaws. And I've spent so much time hiding behind this image, this brand, that I forgot what it means to just be real, to just be me." The audience sat in stunned silence as the weight of Taylor's words settled over the room. This wasn't just a simple admission. It was a revelation. Taylor Swift, the woman who had been the face of perfection for over a decade, had just taken off the mask and shown the world who she really was. She was admitting, for the first time, that the persona they had all loved wasn't the full truth of who she was. And that was something no one had expected to hear. Karoline didn't say a word. She simply nodded, her eyes not filled with triumph, but with understanding. This was the moment she had been waiting for, not to break Taylor, but to give her the chance to break free from the chains of the persona she had locked herself into. "I'm done pretending," Taylor continued, her voice growing steadier with each word. "The truth is, I don't have all the answers. I've made mistakes. I've hurt people. I've used my personal life for publicity. And maybe that's something I have to live with. But I'm not perfect. I'm not going to pretend to be anymore." The room was still, the energy in the studio shifting from tension to something almost reverential. The audience had come expecting a typical interview, a polished conversation filled with rehearsed answers and deflections. Instead, they had witnessed something far more profound, a raw, unfiltered moment of vulnerability. Taylor Swift, the icon, had just peeled back the curtain and allowed the world to see the woman behind the persona. And in doing so, she had finally liberated herself from the weight of her own image. Karoline gave a small, appreciative smile. "That's all we can ever ask for, Taylor. To be honest, to be human. Thank you for letting us see that." Taylor exhaled, as if a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. She no longer felt the need to defend herself, to cling to the image of perfection. The truth was out, and in that moment, it was enough. For the first time, Taylor felt free. She didn't need the world to see her as flawless. She didn't need to be perfect anymore. What mattered now was that she had let go of the chains that had bound her for so long. The truth had set her free, and in doing so, she had earned something far more valuable than fame or adoration. She had earned her own self-acceptance. The studio lights seemed brighter now, not in an oppressive way, but in a way that illuminated the path forward. Taylor had broken free of the persona that had held her captive for so long, and as she looked out into the audience, she knew this moment would change everything. It would change how they saw her, and it would change how she saw herself. For once, Taylor wasn't just the star of the show. She was the person behind the headlines. And that was the most powerful thing she could be. The applause erupted, but Taylor barely noticed it. She wasn't here for the cheers. She wasn't here for the fame or the accolades. She had finally found the truth about herself, about her career, about everything. And that, in the end, was all that mattered. Karoline had set the stage for this revelation, but it was Taylor who had taken the final step. She had won, not by holding onto her image, but by letting go of it completely. And that victory was one that no one could take from her.